Hello, Sean.
Daniel, how are you, my boy?
I'm very, very good. So Sean's resume doesn't need any sort of, doesn't need me to go through it, but I will say he's coached amazing players. He's coached Tiger Woods and Justin Rose and Hunter Mahan. One of my all-time favorite swings, Sean O'Hare. I feel like that was a transformative swing on the PGA Tour. Now he's currently working with Michael Kim, who just finished tied for 6th, Eric Van Rooyen, who finished tied for 9th, and Ben On, who had a career year last year. So I want to start with Michael Kim. In 2020, he was the worst player on the PGA Tour, and that's not even me being a dick. I think he played 16 events. The only time he played the weekend was the old CJ Cup where there was no cut. When a player is so low on confidence like that, where do you even start?
Well, to me, as time has been out there, and you remember, Daniel, when you first came on tour, we had that great night at the place that I stayed at in
I'll never forget it.
In Point Vedra. And I would say that, amongst working with the top 10 players in the world and number ones in men and women's golf and all that, I've kind of felt like, my spot now is I want to really challenge myself. Hold on, man. I can't figure out what's going on. Here we go.
You're good.
I've really enjoyed taking people who've kind of lost their game. The first one was Danny Willett, and starting with Danny. I don't think you could ever say Tiger, because Tiger should always be number one when he's healthy. But Lydia Ko and just really taking these players. I started with Ben and Eric, kind of as they were losing their card on the PGA Tour and going to Korn Ferry. So the one thing about Michael, he's a class act, right? Like he's, as a human being, he's a great guy. And I think as time goes on, you have to change the reason you do things. The why changes. And for me, all the travel, the sacrifice, being away from the family, you just have to make sure that the people you're with are worth that sacrifice. And all my guys right now are very, very capable players. Their best years are ahead of them. But more than anything, if anything ever happened to me, I would have no problem with them mentoring my sons. And that's a massive thing to be able to say about a human being. And, so when Michael came to me, I think he had missed like 44 cuts in a row or some crazy number like that. But, when you're going to invest in somebody, you got to put a lot of time into them. And when they're outside the top 1,000 in the world, from a business standpoint, it's probably not going to be applicable for a while, especially with them going to Korn Ferry. So the fact that Michael was the number one ranked amateur in the world when he turned pro was something that I looked deeply at, because whatever allowed him to be that is still within him. If you look at somebody who's 400 pounds, they still have a six-pack. You just can't see it. So it's not really about adding to anything. It's about taking away from. And, Michael ran down the road of, what happens is players get, they get struggling so bad that they look for answers anywhere. And, to the point that if the valet guy said, hey, I thought your backswing, I think it's too long, they might actually go to the next range and shorten their backswing, right? Short backswings aren't a good idea for all of your listeners out there. And so we just started, and Michael had this shot that kind of started way right and then just kind of sliced out of bounds. And he would have said that he had driver yips, but driving the ball is a gross motor skill. So when we're dealing with like focal dystonia and yips, you're dealing with much more from a nervous system standpoint. You're dealing with fine motor skills. So there is really no such thing as a driver yip. It's just tends to be an open club face with a really poor way of generating force. And so the first thing I did, and it's kind of being outside the box the last few years, my passion has kind of become neuroscience and learning everything I can about the brain. And I probably don't even know 1% of it. But what we did first was to get rid of the pattern of this block slice. I had him for 3 months, and I'll give him so much credit because I don't know how many people would have done this. But I just had him sit on the range and literally hit massive hooks for 3 months, just hitting snap hooks, snap hook after snap hook after snap hook, to kind of get that out of his system within his golf swing. Now, the thing is, none of this stuff starts mentally, right? It starts technically, and then we look down at the driver as we look over it. One of the tricky things about golf is the amount of information. So when someone's telling you to visualize the shot, it's kind of naive and a little cavalier, because as we're sitting there visualizing the shot, our brain is thinking back to a previous time where optically we bring in the information through our eyes, And so our brain is just going through this Rolodex of previous experiences and previous constructs. And so when it gets to that point where the only memory you have is hitting this thing out of bounds, they can barely take the club back. And so the tricky part about the brain is that, it's this omnipotent, amazing thing, but it's designed so that we survive. It's not designed so that we thrive, right? That's consciousness. That becomes a whole different element. So we got our back to the Corn Ferry Tours. I said to him yesterday, I said, hey, bro, go for it today, because this is not really pressure. Pressure is being 25th in the Corn Ferry money list with 1 round to go and shooting 65. Pressure is being on the precipice of losing our card last year and being amazing in the fall season. So this is not pressure. So there's levels to it. So one, you get them back to where they're competent, but they're not confident yet. But competence always precedes confidence in life. Anyone telling you need to be more confident doesn't really know what they're talking about. It's pretty easy to be confident when you know that every time you hit it, you find it. So the difference is that, we still have the anxiety and the trauma on the tee because this brain is very deeply remembered. I mean, all of us on this phone call are old enough to remember where we were on 9/11. No one doesn't remember where they were, because what happens to memories is the more emotionally we are when we react to it, the deeper we reinforce it. And so when people go, well, these guys are just playing golf, Dan. Yes, it's not Afghanistan. Yes, it's not the Middle East. Yes, it's not the Ukraine. But if your identity has been connected to your score since you're 12 years old, they go through fight or flight at those levels. And yes, should they have more perspective? Of course, but perspective only comes from experience. So if your whole experience was basically playing golf, then I just think using the word perspective, just saying it's just golf, it's not just golf to them, right? It's everything to them. And, you go through those levels to where, he's getting to the point now where I can see, like, under pressure where it matters, he's swinging even harder. Mm-hmm. And, the thing is, when you have to face bullies, you realize that the bullies most often just govern through fear, right? So you got to step up and challenge it. And remembering that fear from, the greatest acronym in the world is false evidence that appears real. So we have this incredible brain that spends most of the day being afraid of things and detecting threats. So to really get to where, we can manifest amazing greatness out of ourselves, that takes courage. And the word kura in Greek means wholehearted. So to be courageous on the golf course means to play from your heart. And I think I have to remind these guys a lot, and I've had to do it to myself in my own career. I ask them all the time, like, why play golf, man? Like, why did you even start? I just loved golf. And I'm like, okay, so why can't we keep it like that? Why does it have to be about world ranking points and being on a TGL team and all these things that are outside of us that none of them will we think about in the last week of our life? People will think in the last week of their life how much they love the game, but they're probably not going to remember when they 3-putted the 18th hole to lose a tournament. I just don't think that that's going to be the reflection. So these are the phases that you go through. You go from being terrible to getting better but still feeling terrible to getting better than that and starting to feel like you can do it, and then getting to the point where Michael has finished second, 12th, and 6th in his last 4 events. And I'm the only one not surprised because I've been seeing this high level from this guy for a couple of years now. But, telling someone to believe in themselves, it's once again, it's kind of naive because you have to have a reason to believe in yourself. You have to see it when it all matters. You have to be able to do it because that's how you brandish. That's how you start to cut the lizard's tail of fear and ego, is knowing that you can do it. And so Michael said something funny to me. Eric Van Rooyen was having some issues with his full swing. So I went to Vedanta with him, and Eric is like, it doesn't get better. Eric's a lovely guy, and he's really, really gifted. And so I'm going to sit on the couch all week while they're there thinking about them. So I figured, why not just give myself a chance and go and see them? And Michael showed up, and I was kind of surprised. I said, well, bro, if we get into Bay Hill, this could be like 6 in a row or something. And he said, there's a saying in Korean that when the tide is in your favor, paddle like hell. So yesterday was going to be difficult one way or another because, this guy's just played golf for 28 days in a row. I know that our listeners probably hear that and go, that would be amazing. But that could definitely lead to to putting a weighted vest on and jumping in the ocean too. So that sounds great, but it's a lot. The thing about golf that makes it actually a sport, if you ask me, is that the levels of neural fatigue are so much higher than any other sport because you've got 28 days of working out, getting treated, learning the golf course, making hopefully 68 decisions a day. So it's quite taxing. And so I'm thrilled for Michael and Michael has a big handle on Twitter. He does a lot of great things like that, letting people know what it's like to be a tour pro. And look, man, if these players are vulnerable, then I can work with them, right? If they won't look in the mirror and admit the truth to themselves, then there's nowhere to go from there because life is an inside job. And we are always nonstop all day being Steven Spielberg through the lens of our eyes. And so understanding from a bad mood and a good mood, what we end up creating outside of us is going to be entirely different, but there really is nothing else going on out there except for what we perceive. So kind of just taking the guys through learning how to hit it better. Michael is, I think we're like 14th or 15th in strokes gained tee to green now. We've picked up probably 40 yards off the tee. And I love watching him walk around. Like I've always imagined what he used to look like in college because Max Homa and a lot of people told me that he was impossible to beat. And so, that was kind of, for me, that was the belief that I knew that was still there. And we just need to keep climbing and keep climbing. And I think lately we've been climbing Everest for a while, but we just got some good weather and some good snow conditions. I expect it to become icy and freezing as fuck very soon.
That's the best. That's the best answer we've had in dog history right there. I feel like we got Korean, we got Greek, we got Latin, we got neuroscience. Oh,
yeah. You know what it is.
I know what it is. I know when I ask Sean a question, I gotta I have to do it with a hard end at the end because otherwise I know we're just going to be sitting there for a while. I want to move on to talking about Ben On. I want to play a clip, The Weapon, which you told me was his nickname, my favorite nickname on the PGA Tour. I want to play this was on the range. We put this on our show, or actually on our vlog, on from Scottsdale, and you were explaining how much of your job is this.
My favorite, dude, is when they're like, dude, you've never told me this before, and I'm like, just only every day for 3 years.
They're like his children. Yeah, it's like with you, it's like they're your children. You know what I mean?
At least nephews.
Yes.
Huh?
Yeah, nephews.
How much of your job would you say, and now it's different now, like when you first came out, I feel like you were known for like the technical side. You were really an early adapter of like TrackMan and looking at all these stats. How much of what you do now is sort of that side of golf, is almost being like part life coach almost?
Yeah, it's both, right? I'm 50 years old now. I'm working. These guys average 31 years of age. I mean, if a 31-year-old Sean Foley came in the kitchen right now and sat down and said, "Did you want to talk to me?" I have a shitload to say to this kid. So, look, human being, regardless of how much they're saying we're divided, human beings are the same, bro. The only difference is how we spice our chicken. And I could argue, like from a physics standpoint, that we're not even separate. So all this ridiculous stuff about left and right and all these horizontal structures. Life is based on vertical structures, dude. So it's not really based on any of that. It's based on up and down. And I think that, in golf, you can fail every 15 minutes. And I think the key to being successful in life is really becoming an expert at failure. And, how do you fail? How do you fail well? Failure to me is like wisdom in disguise, right? It's just giving us all the clues and we have to look into it. And so with the players, I just think that they create this defense mechanism that's probably fairly natural to where I will tell them something that I've told them for 2 years and they'll say something like, yeah, that's kind of interesting. And I giggle thinking, well, that's all I've ever talked about. So I think sometimes it's just too hard to look into the mirror every 15 minutes. So I fully accept, I expect it, and I feel like I understand their species quite well.
Yeah. I want to ask you about your time working with Tiger Woods. We're going to show a slow-mo of his swing with Hank Haney and then his swing with you. I think we have this loaded up, control room. Yeah, here it is. Quite different. What were your goals? And before I, let you kind of run free here, you guys had a tremendous success. I think because he didn't win a major, people overlook he won 8 times in a 2-year period. He got back to number 1 in the world. Are you proud of your work? If you could do it differently, what would you do? And what were your goals with his swing?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really look back, it's looking ahead normally, brings anxiety, and looking back normally brings sadness. So it's not something I really pay attention to. I can definitely admit to myself that at that time, I was doing my best from my own level of understanding. I stole that from Nelson Mandela, by the way. So yeah, I mean, I was a young man, and I thought there's levels, right? When you get to the point that you know more than you've ever known, you realize you don't know anything. And at that point, I was kind of drinking my own Kool-Aid, thinking that I had the fix for every single golfer on the planet. So there was a level of arrogance there at that time. But I would say that arrogance was necessary for a kid from Canada who had dreams of coaching on the PGA Tour. There wasn't anybody that I wouldn't tell who walked by me what I was going to do in my career. And I think that I needed to believe that at first. And then I had really quick success with Stephen Ames and Sean O'Hare and Justin Rose and Hunter Mahan. And I just thought, this is going to be a piece of cake, which is funny to look back now, because I've always been so holistic, and I've always been so much into that part of us that, to not realize that I was working with a guy who was just ridiculed in front of the world. I mean, my friend down the street's getting a divorce, and that's hard enough when no one in the world knows about it, bringing in that fact. So I think that Tiger showed us really how human he was during that time. So yeah, did I wish I knew more? Would I go about it any different? I mean, yeah, of course, right? Like if the Germans didn't attack the Russians in the winter, we'd be speaking German, but we're not. So that's it, right?
I wouldn't be here.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good point. That's a very good point. So yeah, look, the guy was a total pro. I love him to death. What an unbelievable thing to be able to say that you did. Yeah, I think you look back and say, I probably wish I would have done this or I would have done that. But I mean, I would have done that if I knew it at the time. I probably would have spent a hell of a lot more time working on the human than on the player. I kind of giggle sometimes thinking that I even discussed his golf game with him. But from what the mistakes that I felt that I made during that time, I was able to, when I talk about being an expert in failure, I do it all the time, So it's when I got with Lydia Ko, who my other nickname for Lydia is Baby Goat. And she's spectacular, man. It's hard to be better at golf than that girl. She's just out of this world. And so when we started, Lydia was 55th in the world. And I thought to myself, okay, if you could do it all again, what would you do? And basically I would just have asked better questions and then forced the athlete to come up with their own answer. And so I did a very good job with Lydia on, not teaching her my preference or what I thought was important in the swing or this or that. And it just kind of, every day I'd get with her, she'd have some questions, I'd answer them. And if I couldn't, I'd find an answer. And then about 9 months later, I asked her, do you have any questions left? And she said no. And she flew to Hawaii and won by 8 strokes. So look, positivity, negativity, that's all just labels and noise, dude. There is nothing in the world that is more, that's more important than purpose and clarity. I mean, if you have those two things there, you're really cooking with oil.
Amazing. Well, I could talk to this guy for hours. I have before. I will again. Thank you so much for joining us, Sean. I'm coming.
We have an ocean view this week. We're here in Orlando this week. And the thing about golf, dude, is like you got to always get these players and people listening to understand that Michael Kim shot like 15 over at Torrey Pines the first time it was there this year, and then showed up to Phoenix. And if you had told me at Tuesday at Phoenix that we would play back-to-back signature events and all that, I would have been not surprised because I know what he can do. But golf is a game just like life that, if you find the right elements and you're working on the right things, there's so much time for redemption. And I think that's the beauty of it all.
It's beautiful. I love that, Sean. I'll see you later this week.
Okay, guys, all the best. Good to see you.
Talk to you soon.